Good morning, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the keynote speakers this morning. Ben and Deborah are fantastic speakers and very knowledgeable in their fields. They give you some very thought-provoking information to kind of take away. And I don't know about you, but Deborah certainly gets me all fired up and ready to fight with people. So I hope she's giving you that. Just to remind you that the session is being recorded, so if you don't wish to be on the recording, then please switch your camera off. Could you also switch yourself on to mute? If you do want to pose a question to any of the panelists and you want to do that verbally, then you can obviously unmute yourself. My name's Nikki Ruddick. I've just recently got married. I'm still getting used to it myself, so I'm kind of flitting between the two at the moment. I'm one of the development officers at Community First Yorkshire, and Andy's in the background here helping me with letting people in and just keeping an eye on what's going on in the background. So we're here to sort of manage the session for you. We're going to have a bit of a discussion this morning around village halls and community buildings, around funding and topics around that issue. What we're going to do is open up the chat. So if you want to put a question to any of the panelists, who I'll introduce in a second, then you can put your question into the chat box and we will pose it and have a bit of discussion through the panelists to hopefully share their knowledge with you. So the panelists today, facilitating the session, Deborah Clark from ACRE. ACRE, you are, sorry, Deborah, you are our village hall expert, if that's all right to say, would you? your expertise, isn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah, I can't profess to know everything, but I usually know where to signpost people to.
Yeah, and I don't know if anybody, any of you use the sort of information sheets and things that are available through ACRE, which you can access through Community First Yorkshire, but they are particularly useful if you're running a community building. We've got Renata McDonnell from the Bernard Sunley Foundation, who are very supportive of community building projects. It's a big area that their funds invest in. We've got Liz Bassendale from the Howardian Hills Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty. They also run a small grant scheme which focuses on many different areas of rural life, but part of that is community buildings, obviously being very much a hub of community life. So Liz is often dealing with community buildings projects. We've also got Jenny Whitemore from the National Lottery Community Fund. So everybody's always interested to hear from the lottery and what their perspective is on funding and where they're sitting with things at the moment. So it's great to have you with us, Jenny. Have I missed anybody there? Did I get everybody on? So just before we start the discussion, at the bottom of the panel of your screen where you see your chat box, you'll also see a live transcript box. If you do want subtitles for today, if it helps you to hear what's going on, see what's going on, then by all means you can activate those subtitles, and that will help with the sort of information. These subtitles aren't recorded on the recording, so we can't take any responsibility for what it says in the subtitles, because sometimes it hears things that weren't said at all, so we apologize for that now. And yep, I think we're all ready to move on. I'll start with a question, Deborah, and then if you want to put that to the panelists, then we can go on with any questions that the group. Deborah, just and to the other panelists, what's your thoughts at the moment on village hall rebuild projects in the current funding climate?
Oh my goodness. Right, rebuild. Are you talking about refurbishment and improvement or a new hall?
I'm talking about new halls, so we're
Brand
talking
new
about
halls.
£400,000
Oh,
plus.
wow.
So it's
yeah, they're funding them is quite a challenge, because traditionally they've been funded through lots of little pots and they're funding, and there aren't any one large amount. So I think if you're planning it, you have to do really look hard and talk to your community about what they really want, and understand that it could take you 2-3 years to get that funding together. You were not going to get a brand new village hall quickly. And I'm not aware that there's any very large pots of money. So, but perhaps our other funders could yes, tell us what their funding situation is for new build village halls. So where should we go first, Jenny?
Just unmute myself. Yes, I mean, you're right that sadly there don't seem to be large pots of funding around at the moment, and this is presenting a real challenge for us, because we're finding that in the current climate we're still, you know, dealing with COVID, and we're still trying to meet the needs and the priorities of lots of organisations that we funded through COVID who now need continued support. So we're finding that we're finding it difficult to prioritise these larger projects, because although we do have a large pot of money in terms of grant funding to give out, it's not bottomless, and we still are having our budget challenges. So yeah, we are finding that we are having to disappoint more applicants who are applying for larger amounts of funding, particularly for these capital builds.
Thanks, Jenny. Renata?
Yeah, so this is interesting for us too. So in terms of the support we tend to give community centres, village halls and so on, we're actually a relatively small funder and definitely not in the lottery size funds. So when we see an application for a new community centre that is coming in at, you know, around $500,000, we're very much one of the kind of the people who might come towards maybe when 50% has been raised, or towards the end, because our grants tend to be quite modest. So they're around 10 to 15, 20, maybe 25, depending on the type of project and where it is in the country as well, because we do prioritise rural areas. But so I have to say, I think I've seen more refurbishments, maybe extensions coming in, people kind of downsizing their projects rather than kind of, you know, the very flashy, maybe passive house type projects that were coming in, you know, that we might have supported 2 years ago, but they would have actually had larger grants to kind of get them really towards the tail end of their funding. So yeah, it's a tough climate out there, and we be sympathetic, but we have to be realistic as well about what's achievable. So the projects that we support, obviously, you know, we need to make sure they're viable. Otherwise, if the grant doesn't go to somebody else instead, you know, who might be able to make it happen.
Thank you. Liz, do you want to make a comment?
To be honest, I think it just backs what the others have said. We used to have SDF, our Sustainable Development Fund, which could make quite a big chunk towards a village hall rebuild, but now we're down on the lower levels as well, really, and sort of match funding.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, if your community hasn't got a community space at all, a village hall, then obviously you're going to look at a new build, but perhaps in the current climate, it's worth looking at the building that you have and seeing what you can actually do to that to make it usable.
Brilliant, thank you. And thanks to all the panelists, that's really useful. I wonder, just leading on from that, what your thoughts are on loans for village hall projects. This is particularly interesting for you, Deborah, because obviously you run a loans scheme, don't you? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and what the sort of how that works and
yeah, I can tell you about the loan fund. And this loan fund's been in place since the 1930s, so it's always been there for village halls. The loans tend to be small, though. We're not going to lend out like £200,000 towards a new hall. The loans tend to be for capital works, so for new doors or floors or roofs or sometimes solar panels. Village halls also use it for cash flow. So if they are doing a village hall project or building a new hall, then they might need need to bridging before they can actually draw down a grant. The loans tend to be small, so very rarely do we give long-term loans over £30,000, because we have to consider that it's communities, and quite small communities, that are paying it back. So if they're taking out a loan and they're not incorporated, then they're personally liable, and then they're handing it on to the next committee and the next committee, because if the loan is at 8 years, then it's going to be spread out. So we do about 10 to 15 loans a year on average, so it's not huge, but the halls that have had them have managed really well. We haven't had any defaulting. We've had a couple over lockdown that have, we've given them a few months break because they haven't had the money to repay it, but we've never had any defaults that I'm aware of in all the time that I'm paying, and it is really valued. I think some people are a bit scared of it because they're scared of tying the village hall up in debt, but so long as you've got a good fundraising record, it isn't a problem. I mean, it would be interesting to hear from perhaps some of the people in this group what they feel about taking up loans. I don't know if any of the other speakers are familiar with loans. So Jenny, Renata or Liz, yeah, you might not. Obviously, you give out grants, not loans. So it's up to you. If you have any comments to make, please do.
Yeah, well, I mean, and we, seeing a loan on application won't necessarily turn us off. I think, it goes back to the case of, does the organisation have a track record of fundraising, or, income generation, or, I mean, obviously, a lot of the improvements are really to actually, get the halls of community centres back up into a case where they're more attractive to hirers. So, for us, that makes a good business sense. That if they can sustain a loan, and if they've run through the numbers and they can show us that in some sort of a business plan, it doesn't have to be 40 pages, but just something that's really thought through and quite sensible. From our perspective, that's not particularly an issue. Obviously, if they're going to commit to a mortgage or something even higher as well. Obviously, if you've got multiple loans, that's going to be a source of concern. So it's just a question of being sensible, I think.
Right, okay, I think that was there a question there in the chat, Nikki, so I'll hand that back to you.
Yes, Kathy was just asking, and does the length of a lease impact grants for refurbishment of community buildings? So it'd be interesting to hear from all of you on that, because you've all got some form of funding available, so yeah, that'd be great.
Normally for the acre one, I think it's usually around about a lease of 21 years. I think, I'd be interested to see what the lotteries is, but we had the Village Hall Improvement Grant Fund, which is now closed, but that had 21 years on it for grants. But other funders are different; they vary.
Yes, we do. Sorry, Deborah. Ours is shorter than that. So, for example, for grants of up to 100,000. We just ask for a minimum of 5 years with no break clause in that. What we ask for.
That's good.
Renata, how about the Bernard Stanley Foundation?
We have a 10-year. So if you're applying to us, you need to have a 10 years still remaining on your lease. So not necessarily that was signed 2 years ago as a 10-year lease, but you've got currently 10 years remaining when you apply to us.
Liz?
Yep, with 5 years because of the low level of our grants. If it's less than 5 years left to run, then I think it would be a sensible conversation with the community and probably with the people who are in charge of the lease, because a lot of the buildings really are just going to roll on anyway. So we do it case by case then.
Right, okay, that's good. I think maybe we should relook at ours then. In that case,
there's quite a variety there, isn't there, from 5 to 20 years. So I know the lotteries goes up depending on the amount that you're actually requesting. So I think 5 is the minimum that you request, isn't it, Jenny?
Yeah, that's right. It is the minimum. That's why I thought, well, simpler probably just to give that. And as you say, there's a whole table and different scales. But if you work on the basis of a minimum of 5 years, as you say, Nikki, that's great.
Thank you. I'll go on to the next question then. Jackie Owens, who's from Kilburn Village Institute, was asking, what if your current hall is requiring a large sum of money to refurbish and extend? So I'm assuming she would like to know the sort of funding situation. And we talked builds or new builds at the start? What about if you're looking to refurbish? What kind of funding might be out there for that?
Right. Okay. How about we go to Liz first this time, rather than me answering it? Do you want to say something first, Liz?
To be honest, we're on the smaller end, so I'd probably be looking at advice from some of the others to help.
Okay, well, I suppose from our experience, large sums of money to refurbish and extend is, I think, what I said right at the beginning, that you won't get one large pot. So you're going to have to apply to the lottery and Bernard Sunley and wherever else is giving out grants for community buildings and put them all together, which can be a bit of a juggle, which is where the loan fund then comes in to fund the last bit. I mean, that's my experience nationally. So yeah, maybe Jenny and Renata would like to comment.
Yeah, well, yes, I agree with that, Deborah. As I was saying before, you know, unfortunately in the current climate, we're no longer finding ourselves in the position that we've got these large sums to invest in one project. So it is definitely, although, you know, much tougher on the applicant, and I do appreciate that, how much work goes into trying to source this funding. But it does seem at the moment that's how it's looking, that it is about sourcing these different streams from different funders or by loans, as you said, Deborah.
Yeah, well, just echoing the others, I mean, Bernard Sunley doesn't actually fully fund a project, and that's something they don't do. So we've always been sort of, you know, one of the cogs in the wheels, really, of doing refurbishments in buildings. So from our experience, I mean, we have a bit of an emphasis on expecting sort of local funds to be raised first, to sort of demonstrate that there is actually, you know, that local people really want the project to get up and running. And obviously, you know, the amounts raised are going to be very much in the context of, you know, where you are and the, you know, size of the population, what's actually feasible for them to raise, kind of reserves coming from the charity's own funds as well. So we really need to see, you know, what they're committed towards it, as opposed to sort of just expecting all external funding. And if they are expecting all external funding, we want to understand why they aren't able to commit. And obviously, you know, there's a great range of reasons now since the pandemic as to why that's not actually possible. But then again, I know I think we've seen an upswing in applications for sort of minor refurbishments, because people have had the 10K COVID grant. And I think that's sort of, you know, giving people an opportunity to sort of get some small projects underway, because of course we do fund quite a range of size of projects as well, including those are, you know, would cost £5,000 and upwards. So I think really it's all about a bit of a mix. And again, echoing what Jenny said, that's a real challenge for people who aren't used to fundraising, and it can be very frustrating. Having been a fundraiser, I understand it. And yeah, it's not easy out there. All you can do is just sort of, you know, call up people who've done projects before and just ask for advice, I think, and just, yeah, get on the internet and do your research.
Yeah, I think that's a good point you just made, Renata, there. Talk to other halls that you're aware of or in your area, and see if there's any pots that they can tell you about that you hadn't heard about. So that's a good point. I suppose the only other thorny subject with extensions and refurbishments is you have to pay the VAT as well. But yeah, that's another subject.
I know, yeah, it is a thorny subject, isn't it? Sorry, Liz.
One other thing as well is identifying the funders who are almost willing to commit first if you match funding things together, because some seem to want you to have the rest of it almost in place, and that's quite a juggle. So like with ours, if it's the first 6 months of the financial year, we're a small contribution, we'll often do a grant offer valid for the first 6 months, just so they can say it's been confirmed, to open up some of those other funding pots.
Yeah, nobody wants to be the first funder. It's that sort of scenario, isn't it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that is a bit of a challenge, Deborah. Yeah, you're right. Nobody wants to be the first, and certainly if it's us and you weren't asking us to fully fund, we would be really wanting to see a plan about how you plan to fundraise and, you know, meet the other costs really, and how you're exploring that, because I think even from our perspective, if we were going to be the first, we wouldn't be in a position to commit to funding when we didn't know where the other funding potentially could come from, because it poses a risk, you know, that it's not going to come to fruition. It's not going to be a success.
I think we gave a grant from the Village Hall Improvement Grant Fund to a village hall at the beginning of the year, and that was conditional on their lottery, on their fairly substantial lottery grant coming through. So yeah, they wouldn't have got it if the lottery hadn't funded. So yeah, it is about balancing and funders wanting to see contributions across the board.
Thank you. That's really useful, and I think we mustn't take anything away of the concept of phasing projects as well, so that we can make some nice little discrete packages that can be funded, because actually that's a quicker way to show achievements to your local community and often get the fundraising ball rolling much quicker. So yeah, just bear that in mind. If you have got a large, it could be broken up into smaller elements. Just moving on from that, if anybody I'm just going to keep reminding you, if anybody has got any questions, to just put them in the chat box. But I'll work my way through my list if there aren't any that come forward. Obviously, some community buildings over the last year have had quite a fruitful year because of the payments from government and COVID closures. I'm wondering what the opinion is of the panel on reserves for village halls, which now, for some village halls, are more significant than they've ever been, and whether that's seen as a positive or a negative when it comes to actually applying for funds.
Oh right, quite a question there. Yeah, we've had lots of halls who, I don't know, I shouldn't use the word profit, but the £10,000 has been a nice little extra sum that they weren't expecting to get, and if they've got good reserves anyway, then yeah, then it was obviously a bonus. I think we've said to halls that £10,000 is supposed to be used to support your hall through COVID, and I don't think there'll be any more grants. So if halls are going to have a difficult winter and they spent that grant on something else, then I suppose that you could question that. But you know, if you've done some improvements to your hall so that you can open it up, then that's obviously a good reason. Yeah, it's always important to have reserves. So if we were giving out a loan and there was for cash flow, for instance, and there was a huge amount of reserves, we might question it. But it's important to have reserves. So personally, I didn't see that as a problem, so long as the hall can explain why they've got that amount of reserve. But the other funders might have a different view on that. Liz, do you want to start this time? Or?
Yep, I don't have any problem at all with them having reserves, to be honest. We'd expect them to dip into their pockets the same as if they were doing local fundraising activities in the year running up to a grant being offered. But a bit of long-term sustainability sat in the bank over the next year or two might not be bad. So yeah, if we can help the village hall to reopen and to get off to a good start again, then great.
Jenny.
Yes, we would take the same view, actually. You know, it makes good business sense to hold some reserves, and the same as you, really, unless they were excessive amounts and they weren't necessarily designated for a particular purpose, then we might be asking questions as to, you know, why some of that perhaps couldn't be put towards the project that they're planning. But on the whole, yeah, we see holding some reserves as good business sense and good management.
Yeah, we'd be the same. I think in terms of reserve, you know, from our perspective, because we can fund quite smallish projects, you know, if there did seem to be quite a large amount of reserves, we'd be questioning why they wouldn't put any money towards it. So I think it's really a case of, you know, explaining, really. And I think that's, you know, that's the issue with, I certainly find with the, you know, a lot of kind of village hall and community centres, you know, not necessarily all, but, you know, we as a very tiny grant making charity, there's only 3 of us and the staff, there's only me and another person assessing. We're very much reliant on what the organisation is you know, producing in its annual report and accounts. So, you know, we're not necessarily going to have local insight knowledge. So from our perspective, it's really important to have, you know, it doesn't have to be very complicated, but, you know, a nice explanation in the trustees' annual report, regardless of the size of your organisation. I think often, you know, very understandably, you know, volunteers who are running village halls and community centres, you know, sort of, well, often and being a trustee myself, I appreciate this. You kind of sort of want to just sort of give the finances to somebody who you feel might understand it, like a sister or somebody who's responsible for that. But actually, you know, just producing for the basic income and expenditure trust doesn't really tell us something about, you know, why you're holding X amount of reserves in your accounts. So from us, it's just about explaining, you know, designated reserves, you know, what plans you have for it, and just giving us a good rationale, because, you know, we would expect people who are running village halls and community centres to sort of be the, you know, the people who understand what they're doing the most. It's not necessarily for us to dictate, you know, how you use your reserves. We just need to understand why and what you're doing with them. So, you know, if you can explain to us really clearly what's going on, as well as explaining to us what you're able to contribute or not contribute, I think, you know, I think that's fine from our perspective.
Thank you. I suppose I should add that all committees should probably have a reserves policy as well. And that's always helpful for funders, because then you can share it, and it will explain why you've got the reserves that you've got. And that there is a reserves policy, I think, in our accounting information sheet.
Yeah, if anybody needs access to a reserves policy, then we would be able to help you with that at Community First Yorkshire, so do come to us. Thanks, sorry.
Sorry, I just got in about this, because we assess so many of these. It's really important not to copy and paste or just say we have 6-month reserves and not explain what those actually are. You really do need to be clear, because I think the committees do actually need to understand themselves why they have it. So it's not just a case of, oh, we just need to submit this to the Charity Commission. Funders are reading this and you're explaining to people what you're using the reserves for. So I cannot emphasize enough how important it is that your trustees' annual report really does explain what you're doing. If you're fundraising, it's really, really important.
Yeah, a very good point. It's the same with all policies, isn't it? Don't just think, oh, here's a model and put your name at the top. You really need to understand it. Sorry, Nikki.
No, absolutely. That's really good advice. Thank you. Chris has posed a question saying that they have a multi-phase on, and the first 3 phases have all been funded from multiple small pots. As we progress, we're finding it more difficult to identify potential sources of funding, as you often can't reapply to the same funders for a period of time. Can the panel advise on funding databases that might be helpful?
Oh, right. Okay. Renata's nodding her head there, so I'll pass it over to you.
So Funding Central, as you know, used to be funded by NCVO and very sadly closed at the beginning of the year, but they have a sort of a small, it's segued into a very small sort of data, well, it's for smaller organisations, it's not a small database called My Funding Central. So I definitely recommend people go and take a look at that. I obviously haven't used it myself because I'm not specifically fundraising. You'd have to set up your own profile and so on, but at least there's something out there that you can use for free. There is an income threshold. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but you know, if you're online there, it might be worth just going up to your website and having a quick look. As far as I know, all other funding databases are still paid for and can be quite prohibitive for very small organisations. It might be worth joining up with other organisations and actually just getting a joint profile. You can all chip in. Maybe your local community foundation might be able to do something like that. I do know there is a man called Ian something from Charity Excellence. You could Google that. I believe he does a free database of funding as well. So that might be something to check out.
I feel like I need to chip in here too, because at Community First Yorkshire we do subscribe to the IDOC's Grant Advisor database, so we are able to undertake grant searches for you that provide quite a comprehensive report on different grants. The good thing about it is not just the report that you get, but also once we've done a search for you, that it will keep updating us on relevant sources of funding that are opening up as and when they're new and they're created. So you know, by all means do come to us. We can do a search for you, we can produce a report, and then we can send you regular updates on new grants that would be cropping up as and when they open. Jenny or Liz, do you want to pop anything in, add anything to that, or?
Only that, Nikki, that was what I would say. You know, if an applicant is asking us, well, where else might we get this from? I usually point them in your direction.
Thank you. And Liz, are you anything more to add, or?
No, we head your way as well.
Okay.
There we go. That's the value of community.
Good advice.
First.
Brilliant. So Chris, please do come to us if we can help. We've got another couple of questions here. I've lost my first one. We've had to remove the bell tower in our village for safety reasons. It's stone and heavy. Also, in our conservation areas, planners say it is to be replaced because because of the weight. We would like to replace this in fiberglass to reduce the cost. Where do we go for funding?
Oh, right. I mean, I don't know if it would come into the criteria of any of the other funders here.
Yeah.
Obviously, you could go to Community First and have a look on their funding database. And yeah, we might be able to help with a loan depending on the amount of funds that the group are looking for. But is it something that the rest of you would fund, Jenny?
It's not necessarily that something that we would fund at the National Lottery Community Fund, but I was wondering whether it might fall under Heritage Lottery in any way. It might meet their criteria. That could be worth exploring if they haven't already.
Liz?
If it was in our area, then yes, we probably would contribute, to be honest.
Okay.
Geographically, I don't recognise the name, so I'm guessing it's probably not. We've also been replacing traditional village nameplates as well, where they've put village name signs have been the modern style ones have been put on. We're helping the communities to go back to the traditional ones, and some of those have been fiberglass instead because they get stolen less and are a lot lighter. So we have got the contacts for somebody who may be able to actually help with the work if they need 3 quotes. So obviously come back to me if needed. And again, Heritage Fund, I would say, is worth a look on the website as well. That was my first thought too.
The difficulty with this particular project is that the funders we have around the table today, I think, are very much around the village hall and the people that the village hall serves, rather than the sort of the structures and things that are, you know, the historic elements of the buildings. So it may be that we need to look more at the heritage funders to see if there's some support there. I'm not sure how you'll get on with replacing a cast iron bell or whatever it's made out with a fiberglass one, but we'd see. We'll have to see what they say about that. I guess aesthetically it would look the same, so that's one thing. Do come to us if we can help you with any of the heritage lottery funders and wider than that, so we can certainly signpost you there. Are we okay to move on to the next question? We've got about 10-15 minutes left. So we're creating a new build appeal. When writing bids, does it help to show the impact for the new build on the actual people affected as mortar, and also to evidence collaborative use of said building? If so, how would funders wish to see this? I think this is absolutely imperative for some of your bids. So Jenny, I think you might be.
Yeah, I think it's just, yeah, it's something that is really, really, really important. Of course, the bricks and mortar are important, but it's the people, isn't it? That repairing a building for the sake of repairing a building, that's not normally what funders want to see. But sorry, Jenny, do you want to come in from the lottery's point of view?
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right with this. You know, does it help to show the impact? It's vital from our perspective, and you're right, that's what it's about for us. And we do understand that for you, it probably is about refurbishing that kitchen or the toilet area or some other area because it desperately needs doing and it's just not really fit for purpose, and we get that. And actually, if that's what it is, then I would say maybe we aren't the right funder for you, because that's not how we look on these things. You know, we are looking for the difference it's going to make to the people, the diversity in your communities. You know, who can you bring in, who's going to benefit from this, and how, what is the difference it will make to people's lives in those ways. You know, areas of disadvantage, disability, it is about the people for us. That's definitely what we're looking for. And the other aspect of the you know, the physical changes to the building from our point of view are absolutely secondary in terms of whether it meets our criteria or not. So yeah, it's definitely vital. If so, how would funders wish to see this? I think, you know, that real sort of community involvement, and why is this needed? Who wants it? How are they involved? Excuse me, how are they driving it? It's those aspects, you know, from your school children to your young people in the area, to, you know, all ages, families, older people, whoever it is. Are they involved? Do they have representation, or your management committee? How does all of that work? We're kind of looking to see that that people element is really embedded in who you are and what you do. And I would again sort of just reiterate the importance of not trying to make who you are fit with who we are, because that's not what we're asking you to do. So if you're looking at that and you think, well, you know what, we're not like that, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but maybe we're just not the right funder in those circumstances. So I think that's, you know, hopefully that's a helpful message to get across kind of from our perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. I think the others would echo that. But Renata, when you're actually assessing applications, as you said that you do, what would you look for? Are there any particular documents or things that the committees can do to show that they've talked to their community to find out what they want?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, Deborah, from our perspective, you know, we try to be proportional. So if someone's coming to us and need to replace their boiler, it's going to cost them 20 grand. You know, we're not going to be looking. Let's face it, if they're doing an extension, it's going to cost 200 grand. Well, you know, it would be good to start seeing a lot more evidence coming in about the need for it. So, for example, we don't specify this, but, you know, I mean, you know, and of course, because people are often applying to the lottery, very helpfully, people do a lot of consultation, community consultation. So that's always really helpful. And it doesn't have to be a big rigmarole, but we need to see some evidence about how do you know that this, you know, I think you don't see this very often, but, you know, a vanity project for the trustees has been mentioned back in the day, and thankfully I don't think we see this very much anymore, but we need to know that there's definitely a need for it. So I'd echo everything that Jenny has said. Definitely, I think, you know, at the end of the day, you know, the Berners-Sonny Foundation is there, you know, to enhance the quality of life for a variety of people. So it's not to enhance the quality of the buildings that we see on the street. So it is very much about people. But in terms of documents, letters of support sometimes can be really nice. Obviously they can be a bit long-winded. Obviously, you know, we say letters, we mean emails, let's face it, or, you know, just a bit more evidence about who you're involved with. Partnerships, you know, it can be very simple, lists of organizations that you work with in the community. Again, I think it's completely dependent on the nature of the work, but you know, you just need to show us and tell us, you know, do you have that thing online you can point us to, that we can kind of double check. So sometimes village halls are so embedded in the communities, they actually don't have a website, so they don't really, you know, they don't really need to advertise themselves, but actually that makes it very hard for us to assess. You know, we're not going to be able to go locally. You know, I'll go on Google Maps, but, you know, I'm relying on a secondary source there to kind of get a sense of your community. Facebook pages, obviously lots of people do have them. Sometimes it can be out of date. That then is a little bit of a concern. Is it just because the IT person who volunteered to do it is now left and nobody else knows the password to the Facebook you know, page, or, you know, actually are people not that really interested in updating the community. So, you know, we're looking for a range of evidence, and I'm sure everybody does, but, you know, not being, you know, I think it's important to emphasize as a sort of a semi-national funder, you know, we're completely reliant on your online presence, what you tell us in your application, what's in your documents that you submit to the Charity Commission, you know, to explain to us that you're good governed, you're well run, that, you know, you are actually engaging your local community in whatever is appropriate for your organisation.
Thanks. Liz, do you have anything to add? Most of the points have been covered.
I think a lot of it's been covered. I mean, we're quite a local funder, really, so we generally know the communities quite well and have a feel for the villages. I think we would still ask for some kind of evidence of how well used the hall is, or are there groups that perhaps the committee know of who would like to set up in the hall, but there's a limiting factor, maybe it's too cold, maybe there's no baby changing facilities, whatever it might be. But again, a light touch letter of support, an email, it doesn't, for us, we're on low level grants, it doesn't need to be big. We've recently started more a maintenance type grant as well. We were always looking for something a bit inspirational, and now our village halls, a lot of them have been rebuilt or fitted, but we've now got, you know, village halls wanting kitchens, village halls needing help with flooring. It's, you know, I'm happy to walk in, and if there's splinters coming out of a wooden floor and a toddler group, I'll draw conclusions based on what I've seen as well, and talk it through with a group. So
okay, thanks.
local advantage, I think.
Yeah, it's the difference between a very local funder,
Yeah.
isn't it, and a national funder.
And
You do
relatively
have
low
some
level
advantages.
grants as well,
Yeah.
so our risk factor is lower, really.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, Nikki.
Yes, I do have to say, if we have got some people in the room that are not village halls, but the information stands for all of the community buildings, whatever kind of building you're from. The same message would go across to you too. So I hope you're feeling this is relevant, because there's some really useful stuff coming from the funders today. Kathy's our next question is from Kathy again. Is it okay to apply for grants from Awards for All, Heritage Lottery and Community Fund at the same time for different projects? And what advice would you give for multiple grants for the same project as a backup in case others turn them down? That's probably to you, Jenny.
Yeah, that's probably to me. Heritage Lottery are separate from us, really. So yes, it's okay to apply to Heritage and to apply to us. In terms of applying within the Community Fund, you can apply to both Awards for All for a grant of £10,000 and under, as well as applying for a Reaching Communities grant, £10,000 and over, provided they're not exactly for the same thing. So, you know, you might apply for the smaller grant for just some small capital items, but then apply for the Reaching Communities grant for sort of the wider support, grant support on the project. So yes, in a nutshell, it is okay to apply to all of those.
Great, thank you. I hope that's answered your question, Karen. Next question from we're spending about 20k from reserves on the exterior of a village hall. We need funding to replace old radiant heaters with more eco-friendly infrared heaters. Is that something funders find attracts grants fairly easily?
It's interesting, isn't it, because it's not part of a necessarily a bigger refurbishment or extension. So yeah, some of the funders on the panel here today might not do just what fund one item. So obviously the loan fund would cover that. I think I'd just like to add very quickly to this sort of discussion that ACRE works nationally, so we do talk to DEFRA and some of the other government departments, and obviously because of the drive towards net zero, we are talking with various departments about funding and trying to find something or help set up something that might actually help village halls reach targets in the future. So that's something that we're looking at. But another thing I would add, I think that halls do need to be aware of, if you're looking to replace, say, your heating system, some funders might want to know, well, have you done an energy efficiency audit first? It's no good replacing your heating system if you've got no insulation and all this nice new heat is just going to go out the walls and doors. So just a thought. But yeah, I don't know if anyone else would fund just radiators, so I'll have to leave that to you. Renata, you're nodding your head.
Yes, yeah, we're happy to do stuff like that, but again, we don't fully fund it.
No.
So, you know, I'm not sure how much that project's going to cost. So say 20k or something. I know you something that was for reserves for something else. You know, I mean, our small grants start around 2,500, and that would be, you know, for a project maybe costing 10 or 15k. So, you know, it's a really small proportion, really. So you're definitely going to need to get funds elsewhere, for either from local fundraising, your own reserves, or elsewhere. But yeah, we're happy to do slightly more, you know, more routine projects like that.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment from the panel?
Again, yeah, we'd consider it, but we're down on the 50% and under, and only up to about £2,000 for that kind of project. So we'd be looking to probably help you to find some match funding as well. It was it's out of area this time, but if it was on one of our communities.
Okay, well, I suppose, you know, if you got some money from Liz and then you took a small loan to top it up, then the money you'd be saving on your electricity is the money you could repay the loan. So yeah, maybe that's a way of thinking about it. Anyway, back to you, Nikki.
Okay, just to add to that, we have got a fact sheet for community now on sort of energy efficiency projects, and it does list some potential sources of funding on there, but this is changing all the time now. There are more and more grants becoming available for insulating buildings and making them much more energy efficient. So I think it's a good time to be starting to think about it and costing out your project, because there will be opportunities coming available. I don't think we've got any more questions in the chat. If anybody else has got anything they'd like to pose, please do so. Just leading on from the conversation we've just had, I'm just wondering about electric vehicle charging points. We've had quite a few inquiries about village halls putting them within their car parks. Is this something that that funders are looking favourably upon at the moment? And how any difficulties that you've experienced with them, with community buildings?
Yeah, there are a few that have already installed them, and there's I think there's money available in some counties through local authorities, but that then comes from local authorities to parish councils, I believe. I'm not 100% familiar with that, but it is also something that ACRE's looking at, because we're aware that there's funding going to become available, and we believe that charging points should go into village halls. I know there's a lot of perhaps issues and concerns by village hall committees, but it's something that ACRE's working on, because if we don't put them in now, in 20 or 30 years time, village halls will be behind the curve, because they're going to maybe be required and people in the community will want them. So yeah, it's something that we would definitely encourage, and from ACRE's perspective, then watch this space, because it's something we're working on. So yeah, I don't know if the rest of the panel have a view on car charging points. Renata, you look like you're about to say something there.
We don't fund them specifically. We tend to fund them as part of a larger encouragement. So I think if you submit an application for us just for charging points, you probably wouldn't be successful. We'd see them a little bit more as equipment, and you know, we equipment for us, you're almost better off giving us a call to discuss something, whether it's equipment or not, because we really are more bricks and mortar. But yeah, it's a funny one. It's I think it's going to come up more often now.
Yeah, definitely. But it's also about you know, the benefit. The car charging points might benefit people in the community. How is it going to benefit the hall? There's the issues about charity, people parking on charity land, and whose responsibility. So there's lots of things that we're looking into at the moment around the legalities, as well as just the funding. But there are organisations, if you're sort of ready to deal with it. I mean, there's an organisation called Charge My Street that some of you might be worth looking at. They might have some more information for you. Jenny or Liz, do you want to add anything or not?
Well, only just to sort of just to say we would take the same line really as Renata has just mentioned for that. So as a standalone, no, we probably wouldn't. But you know, if it was part of another project that, as I've said before, was more focused on the difference it's going to make to people, then yeah, we would treat it as a capital item within that overall application.
Okay. Liz?
I've only had one application in for them so far, and we actually didn't fund it in the end, but more because it was a community who'd already had 2 or 3 fairly significant village hall grants in the previous couple of years. They've got some success with the district council as well as another funding stream as well.
Okay.
It wouldn't be a definite no, but I think we'd need to look at the sort of wider picture. But we've got quite a lot of villages with on-street parking as well, so they were also thinking of their residents.
Yeah, I just think it's something that village hall committees need to start thinking about, and it's something that we're thinking about from the advice point of view. I just trying to think now. I think it's Kent. They have actually got money coming through for village halls through the local authority for car charging points. So yeah, it's actually a project going on down there. So I'm keeping an eye on that to see what happens and what the issues are. But yeah, that's it for now.
Thank you. That's brilliant. I mean, we'll be wrapping up soon, but I just wondered if we could just pose one more question, which is, can the panel share any innovative ideas of recent things they've seen going on in village halls, either activities and services or fundraising ideas that have been really, wow, that's amazing, that's really clever, that they could share in the room today?
Gosh, off the top of my head, innovative ideas. You know what? Not really. And that sounds awful, doesn't it? But from our village hall improvement grant fund, it was for extensions and renovations and improvements. And it's all very well to have innovative projects, and that's really good. And if it's a fundraising activity, well, brilliant. But I think we need to make sure the hall has got the basics, and most of our applications were for roofs, doors, floors. And they came first, and I know Defra said to us, these are not very exciting projects, but actually they're vital and they're much needed. So yeah, it's really hard when funders say they want something innovative, because sometimes what our hall just needs is a new roof to make it watertight. But I think we've been trying to work with the National Rural Touring Forum to try and get arts and culture activities, concerts and all sorts of things into village halls, and those are the most exciting things I've seen recently. I think because they bring the community together and there's something for everyone and they're intergenerational. So yeah, arts and culture and that type of thing, because it's bringing performance in and it's helping the performers as well. So any other suggestions for innovative projects you've seen lately, Liz?
I'd say we've gone less innovative.
Yeah.
I think we're going back with what they want to achieve as actually being kitchens, heating systems, floors. We were innovative 15 years ago when it was ground source heat pumps and that type of thing to heat the halls, but now we've gone full cycle to halls that perhaps have heating but now really need some new cupboard doors for the kitchen, which is fine with us. Haven't had much in the way of innovative fundraising, but I guess the last 18 months or so it's been more limited. But pre that, I'd say we're in the safari suppers and Kayleys and all the rest of it, the normal village events that go down really well. But they do bring different generations in together.
Yeah, definitely. Vanessa?
Yeah, I think I'll be echoing the same as the others. I mean, you know, we're a bit of a for village halls and community centres, you know, we're not expecting to see anything innovative, and that's not what we're here for. We're here to make sure that the, you know, exactly, the building's watertight. You've got what you need to actually run, you know, a play school or you know, Age UK lunch or something. So, you know, to be honest, we don't really see, that's not where we see innovation from. And in terms of fundraising, obviously everyone's had to go online. I think we'll probably have very mixed results. So, you know, our sort of expectations from that have been low as well. I think on the whole, I just sort of admire people's tenacity to just keep on going. It's I think it's been a real blow. Obviously, when people were starting Capture Project, they get all really excited in 2019. They did all the consultation, they got all ready to go, and suddenly, you know, the bottom fell out of it in 2020. So all I can say is that I think, you know, for people to be able to actually just keep going with their very straightforward project, I think, you know, hats off to them basically.
Okay, Jenny, do you want to add anything?
Well, only just, again, we're not necessarily looking for innovative, and happy to go really with what those local communities want and whatever kind of activities they want. I guess not necessarily in the innovative category, but probably say some of those intergenerational activities that I've seen. They can be quite exciting, and the way sometimes community buildings and village halls and the people around them have really thought about how they can benefit one another, from young children somehow interacting with the older people in that community, and that has perhaps come out of this community space that they've got, and some of those can be quite exciting. But from our perspective, we do really feel that the communities know best what they want and what works for them. So it doesn't have to be innovative. If it's what they want and you can clearly demonstrate that, then that's all we need, basically. Yeah.
I'm sure everybody in the room today is taking great reassurance from the fact that funders aren't wanting you to be wildly innovative with what you're doing, and that actually what they want is to keep going what you're already doing, because you're doing fantastic jobs. So I'm sure that's very reassuring for them. I've got one final question, and then I'll wrap it. Just a quick one to Liz. Will Howardian Hills AONB fund developments in nearby towns that will benefit the residents of the settlements in the Howardian Hills?
I think it probably depends very, very much on the project. Our funding is focused within the Howardian Hills. We have funded groups from Malton. We certainly funded Site Support Rydale in the past to bring a walking group out into the AONB, so enabling a certain group of people from the market town to experience an area that they otherwise might have had difficulty accessing. Capital works type projects within a nearby market town or nearby countryside, I would say, are quite unlikely because the funding is tight. However, if you go, I don't obviously know the nature of the project, if you go onto our website, there's an info@Howardian Hills email address. If you feel your project might fit, having had a look at the grant information on the website, by all means, drop an email to that info@ address and one of us will get back to you either way. And if we can't fund, we might be able to link you up with somebody who can.
Right, that's brilliant. I hope that answers your question, Anne. Thanks everybody for taking part in the panel discussions today, and thanks very much to our panelists for answering the questions so thoroughly for us. I'm sure you've given us lots of information to take away and think with projects.